Hi, this is Dustin with Dustin's Dollars. Today I'm going to be talking about Knightscope and about the Robot Roadshow, giving some of my thoughts on this and how I think this is helping out the company. Before I begin, let me remind you that I'm not a financial advisor or a financial professional of any sort. All opinions that I express in this video are mine and do not represent those of any company or any other individual. I currently hold a long position in Knightscope. So this video should be for your entertainment purposes only because I could be wrong about everything I say in this video. You need to do your own research before making any investment decisions. So, the Knightscope Robot Roadshow. Real quick, in case you haven't been following, I'll give a brief overview of what it is. It is this little pod, as they describe it, that they cart around with a semi-truck to various locations across the United States. And in this pod, it's large enough for people to walk in, and you can see here where they've actually deployed it someplace. And they have some of the robots inside. They have screens in there where you can have a virtual chat with some Knightscope employees. And that lets them effectively, hi Walkaza, that lets them take the robots around the country and show it to folks who want to see the robots. And they, I think, have done 40 to 50 landings, as they call them, right? Stops in various cities across the United States. And I think this represents, they had a recent video, they mentioned it represents about 16 states plus Washington, D.C. as well. And why are they doing this? And I'm addressing this because I've seen some comments and some questions online where people, I don't think they quite understand what they're doing, right? I've seen people compare this to commercials and ads that they ran on CNBC and other places where it sort of seemed like the company was spending a lot of money just to advertise and just to get their name out there. And I see this as more sales rather than marketing. I'm going to go through what I see with this and as quickly as I can. So from the most recent video that Knightscope had, this was from Benzinga. You can find it. It was linked on their Twitter account, I think, where Bill Lee was on a live chat with some interviewer there. He said that people want to come, to touch and see and feel the robots. And so I think about this a little bit like a car dealership, right? Before you go buy a car, you want to go take a look at the car, sit in it, take it for a test drive, those sorts of things. And, people want to go look at the car before they buy it. I think it's the same for the robots, right? People, especially because this is something brand new, you're not used to seeing security robots around. A lot of people have probably never even seen any security robot in person. And so they want to go see it with their own eyes and sort of get a feel for what the thing is. And even more so than just the robots, I think those screens in there let them show, if I understand correctly, what the client will see. Let me try to find. Yeah, they don't have a great. You can see it a little bit here in this middle screen, right where I have my mouse over, where this is showing them what folks would see from the Knightscope Operations Center, the KSOC. The output the robot will be showing and what the client's software capabilities would be when they actually have this service. And so I think that's an interesting thing for folks to be able to see kind of firsthand before they actually purchase the service. And the problem this is solving for Knightscope is, people aren't sure about the robots and they want to see them because it gives them more confidence. And they only have, a few folks and robots in California, but their clients are all over the United States, right? There actually was a time earlier on in the company's history, I think in 2015, 2016 or so, when Knightscope had not expanded nationwide and they were just focused on a region in California, but that is certainly not the case anymore. They have clients all over the United States, and they have presumably prospects in even more locations than that. And so it creates a logistical challenge, and I think this is a reasonable solution for them to actually physically bring the robots to these folks. And they mentioned in I can't recall if it was in that video with Benzinga or in the investor town hall from a couple months ago, where they said what's worked is to have Knightscope be able to have sort of the virtual Zoom meeting with prospective clients first, and talk to them, have, give them some information so that people aren't seeing everything all at once in person and taking everything in, just in one time, so that by the time they come to the Robot Roadshow, they already have some information, they have some understanding, and now they can start, they can be formulating questions that are relevant to them. And, when they're there in person, they can actually see everything and see the materials a little bit better. And when I heard them talking about that, when I heard Knightscope talking about that, what it screamed out to me is that they are qualifying folks before they go to the Robot Roadshow. And, by that, I mean, they're having this initial meeting with folks and they're feeling them out. They're, of course, telling them and giving them the information, but they're also feeling them out for, does this person actually have a problem that we can solve? Does this person actually have the budget that fits for our services? And so from that perspective, they're qualifying these prospects. And by the time they actually push them to go to the Robot Roadshow, they're already on the next step of the sales process with these folks. And another thing, that this is a bit speculation on my part, but I think what they're doing with the Robot Roadshow is they're actually creating scarcity, right? When the Robot Roadshow comes to your city, that's a limited time opportunity for you to come see the robots. And so if you have interest in the robots, you're going to go do it, right? This is something that's slightly different than, say, a car dealership, where if I want to go to the local Toyota dealership and go see, whatever cars they have there, the Camry, I'm blanking. So if I want to go see a Toyota Camry, I can do that pretty much any day of the week, right? I'll go whenever I finally get around to saying that I want to go take a look. If I could only go see the Toyota Camry and I was interested in one, but I could only go see it, one day in the next 6 months, or even I know that they're coming to my town, in a month, and I'm not sure when they'll be back after that, but I would kind of like to see one and see what it's like. I'm going to probably make it a priority to go do that, or at least it's going to be more urgent for me to do that if I truly have interest. So this creating scarcity, I think, could be a really interesting tool to actually motivate some folks to come out and see the robots and move forward in the process with Knightscope. And I think there's even a further implication, which is that they are selecting the cities and the locations for where they are bringing the Robot Roadshow to where they have qualified leads, right? And I think there's at least a little bit of evidence that this is really working for the company. One of them is pretty obvious. One of their recent sales announcements is that, they publicly, where is it at in here? Sorry, I'm trying to find it. They just stated in this particular sales press release that the sales for this client can be attributed to the Robot Roadshow, right? And this was a casino in Las Vegas, and they certainly had a stop in Las Vegas, I think, for a couple days a month or two ago. And they called it out directly here in the press release, saying, hey, the client, after they came to the Robot Roadshow, signed a deal. I speculate that there are actually a couple more. One of them is this announcement from mid-February from an Atlanta nonprofit. There was a stop of the Robot Roadshow in Atlanta in early January. So again, I don't, it's correlation, not causation, but I would say that seems likely that this client would have attended the Robot Roadshow a month earlier and, liked what they saw and, finished up the process and finally made a decision. I think there's one more that, this is maybe a little bit more of a stretch, but there was this sale for a distribution center in Kentucky in mid-May, and I think near the end of April, there was a stop of the Robot Roadshow in Cincinnati, Ohio. Cincinnati, Ohio is, on the very, very southern border of Ohio, and right over the border there is Kentucky. And so anywhere in the northern half of Kentucky would be at least within driving distance of Cincinnati. And so there was, about a half a month to a month lag time here. So this is another one where I would speculate that that's actually was a sale that was strongly influenced potentially by Robot Roadshow visit. So you said, sorry, I wasn't following along while Kaza, you said correct. Something that I said before. So sounds good. Glad that you agree with me. So feel free to add more comments on that. I'm wrapping up at this point. But one other thing that I wanted to call out here is, I think hopefully we'll see more of this in the future, where some of these cities where they've stopped, we'll see some sales announcements. And again, I know their sales cycle can take months, so I think there could be quite a lag time between here. And I'm sure not all of them are going to convert into sales, but again, I think that it's plausible. And a couple of the real interesting ones that I wanted to call out is they have had some stops that imply federal government visits. They had one for Federal Protective Services in the middle of May. I mean, granted, they were actually just in Washington, D.C. at the Ronald Reagan building, I think, at the end of last year for almost a week, and we don't really know who they met with there. But here's one where they called it out. They were at the Federal Protective Services, and then they had one, I think they're there right now at Kennedy Space Center, right? And that sort of implies they're talking to NASA. And so I think that's also pretty interesting. And obviously they're not yet, Knightscope is not yet through the FedRAMP process, and I covered that in another video, but they are at least, they're starting the discussions with these folks and letting them see the robots now. And that could actually lead to some pretty good activity and sales with some of these federal agencies once they complete that FedRAMP process. And just one last parting thought from the most recent Benzinga video, and this was a tiny little comment. It was just a one little snippet that Bill Lee said, where he said, "We're getting requests for people to host the roadshow." And here where I'm going to be speculating even more than I was before, but I wonder if when he says we're getting requests for people to host the roadshow, does that mean we're talking to clients? Clients are saying things like, yeah, I kind of like it. That sounds pretty interesting. I want to see it before I sign on the dotted line. I want to actually kind of experience this in person. And so is him saying we're getting requests for people to host the roadshow, might those be clients who are saying, hey, I think there's some place you can host it. I'd like you to bring it here so that I can see it because I'm interested enough to purchase. Kaza, he said, question. What's your question? Because I'm actually finished with the prepared material that I have, so perfect time for a question. For anyone else who is watching the video after the fact, because I don't see anyone else on the stream right at the moment other than myself and Walkaza, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm sorry if I'm not. I'm done with all my prepared material, so thank you for watching. And I usually do these streams around 10, 11, 12 in the evening, Eastern US time. So if you want to ever hop on the chat, feel free. So, again, that's everything I want to say. I'm hanging around. Wakaza, what's your question? I think there's some lag time here. I'll have to look into that. The lag time, I mean. Not showing up for me yet, so I'm hanging around. Question. You said question. Still not seeing anything. All right, here you go. How do you compare Knightscope accounting and the way they spend versus large tech companies? So I don't think it's a good comparison to compare Knightscope to large tech companies. I think that, then the natural follow-up question would be, what is a good comparison? And that is a very good question. I mean, obviously they have a direct competitor that we could take a look at in AITX. I'm not going to go into any details here. I don't understand AITX's reported numbers completely. So I don't really want to, although they are a competitor, I don't think it's good to compare them. I kind of just look at it myself, and I don't know if you had a more detailed question there. How do you compare the accounting and the way they spend versus large tech companies? Or large tech companies when they're first starting out, right? So startups, right? And they're a little bit unique, right? Because a lot of large tech companies focus initially when they're small, right? When their accounting is simple and straightforward, they're typically either hardware or software focused, whereas Knightscope is kind of both, right? They're selling hardware, but as a service. Um, and so it's a little bit weird, right? Because you want to look at it as a service that they're providing, but it does not scale with it does not scale the same way as software as a service. That's for sure. Um, and to be totally, frank with you, their accounting is a little bit opaque. And I've gone over this in the past, but they don't give enough detail to really have a great understanding of how much each component of their cost of services contributes. And I can, pull this up fairly quickly just to illustrate, and that is to say, their most recent statement of operations. Let me zoom in and get here. They talk about their cost of revenue, and obviously, I've covered this in the past. Their cost of revenue means that they have a gross loss, which is horrible. If that were actually telling the whole story, that would just imply the more sales they have, the more money they're going to lose. I don't think that that's the case. Obviously, I have a long position in Knightscope, but then their explanation for the cost of revenue, they talk about, you can pick out the depreciation, you can pick out only a couple things. What is this? This is so they don't break it out, right? That's really the problem, where they say the increase primarily due to increase in personnel costs related to increased headcount and increased cost for production, shipping, and service of the ASRs. They don't really give any real breakdown. And I think in some of their older filings, they gave at least, like, I'm going to go to one where I know that they had this. Cost of services. They at least broke out the categories of what their cost of services were. Maintenance, depreciation, third-party software licensing costs, deployment-related costs, communication costs, data storage costs, and facilities allocations, and then plus, some costs for actual humans that they think are directly should be included in cost of services. But there's very little detail on how much of any of these contributed, other than depreciation. They do actually note the depreciation. And I have a whole video talking about this in the past, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. You could look up. I think this is when I said, how can they get their gross loss to a gross profit? I think there was the title was something like that. But we don't know which of these are fixed expenses and which of these are variable. I mean, I can tell you some of them. Communication costs, data storage costs are going to be variable. Deployment related costs, that one probably, that's more of a variable cost, although it doesn't, that can also be influenced by how long one deployment lasts, right? You don't have extra deployment costs if one robot is just at a client site for 5 years. You don't have new deployment costs every year. But then some of these other things, like facilities allocations, like I don't know how much are they charging for the the actual facilities to build the robots in their cost of services. Like that could be large. I don't know how much the third party software costs are, right? And so it's hard to really pick it apart and get a sense of how are they going to scale these things. Similarly, like headcount, right? Headcount and facilities, of course, would very, very loosely scale with the number of robots that they have under contract, but not directly, right? You have one facility, you can build quite a few robots until you run out of space there. Same with like the people who are, presumably these people are the people who are assembling the robots and deploying the robots. And you can have one person can keep building robots for a while, and that's not directly scaling with your number of robots deployed. Number of robots that are actually deployed at a point in time, I should say. I don't know if I answered your question or not. I don't think I had a great answer for you, because I just don't think it's. I'm not sure I can compare it too much. Can you do a set reminder next time? This way we all know ahead of time and we all show up. You know what? I'm not sure what you mean by set reminder. I had tried tonight. I had tried to do a scheduled live thing where earlier on I had tried to say I'm going to go live at 10:45 in Eastern US time, and I had done that, I don't know, 20 minutes or so earlier than that, just because I was kind of testing it out, and because I wasn't exactly sure when I was going to go on. So I only had really 20 minutes of lead time. I tried it out, and apparently I didn't do everything right, because this time of me doing the video is my second time. I spent 15 minutes talking to myself, and then I finally realized there was a second button that I had to hit in order to finally start it. So, yeah. I'm gonna try to at least do that, and I'm not sure if that accomplishes what you're trying to do or not. I think what it does is it will say, I think we'll send a notification that says, I'm gonna go live at the point at the future point in time when I say I'm gonna go live, and then that should let everybody know at least that's what's gonna happen. So I think that might be the same thing that you're asking for. I will try it next time, at least if I do have some, if I know what I'm going to have the time to be able to hop on, that would be it. All right. I have someone else on here ask a question. I'm Mohammed Habib. Sorry if I mispronounced. That's my, I'm trying there. Last time you mentioned that they deployed about 90 robots and it was a big growth. Now they deploy a robot almost every other day, so they are getting profitable faster than expected. So couple things there. Yeah, they have been announcing a fair bit, although it is important to differentiate which of those announcements are sales and which are deployments, because there is a drastic difference between those, right? A sale is when, someone signs a contract. It's from that point on, Knightscope has to, assemble the robot, get it deployed at the client site, do a little bit of configuration there. And that's what deployment means, right? And if you look at some of their, all of these announcements that I had up right now, right? This is this one would be a sale, right? They announced today, signed its second contract, right? So this was not a deployment, this was a sale, right? And they're not actually getting revenue. They can't book revenue until they've deployed the robot. And for some examples of deployments, the deployments I think are pretty straightforward, where they actually, trying to find, where's the investor relations link? Just to give you an example, investors, here we go. It's loading, but you'll see it. It'll say, hey, today Knightscope deployed a robot at this client site. And so it's not until they actually deploy that they can book revenue. And yes, what Kaza followed in, it's 99 robots so far. And that's my best estimate, right? Based on the robot numbering, and kind of, I do keep track of every announcement that they have. And, if you add up all the deployments where they've announced, it would be over 100, but presumably they had some cancellations in there. So yeah, I think about 100 is roughly where they're at. And so your question then of, so they're not actually deploying a robot every other day. It seems like they have either kind of a sale or a deployment. And if you look at their most recent filing, this is their Q1 of 2022 filing. You do see that they have a backlog here, and they talk about that. And this was as of May 2nd. They have a backlog of orders to deploy 29 robots, right? And so that represents $1.6 million. If they already had the sales, they just have to actually build the robots and get them deployed at the customer sites. And this was, again, as of the beginning of May. So they're certainly backlogged on those. And again, they've talked about a number of reasons why this is. Number one, supply chain constraints. And, along with that, not just supply chain constraints, but actually, lack of cash, because until they actually did the listing, they were not exactly flush with cash. And then also, they've just come out and said that it takes them a long time, right? That they to actually build and assemble the K5, I think they say it takes somebody 100 hours of manual labor to put it together. And so that's a lot of time, right? To put 29 robots together is 2,900 hours, right? And you're talking, it's like roughly 1.5 people years, right? If I'm doing the math correctly in my head. So it's just a lot of work to actually put all these robots together. And so they, again, if they could have snapped their fingers and had all the robots, they already had the clients back in May. for an additional $1.6 million worth of annual subscription revenue of $1.6 million at that point in time, which would have been, what is this, almost 30% increase in their revenue, just with the clients that they already had signed. So that's at least something to keep in mind. All right. Yeah, and I don't know why this isn't working. Maybe my internet isn't working. So hopefully you can still hear me. That was everything I had to go over today. And this is, I don't know if you all have any more questions. If I don't see anything soon, I am going to hop off. Thank you both for hopping on here. I appreciate it. I love having folks on here and getting some conversation going. I'm not seeing anything else. I'm going to give it a moment. Didn't they receive a loan? They did not get a loan recently. They had an equity financing thing. I don't know why this isn't loading. They do. I'm going to give you two answers here. So number one, they do kind of get loans. They have this arrangement with Dimension Funding, where when a client signs a contract for a robot, they can take that contract and go to Dimension Funding and basically get fronted most of the money that they would get for the lifetime of the contract, right? So they can get most of the money for that 12 months up front. And it's actually sort of financed through this other company. I have a whole video about it if you look through my history for Dimension Funding. The second piece there is they did announce an equity funding thing with, I think it was B. Riley. Sorry if I'm getting that mixed up. Let me see if I could find that. That was not a loan per se. That was a, what do I want to call it? I'm sorry, I'm not a professional, so I don't know the right term, but effectively it was they call it a committed equity facility. And this is an agreement with B. Riley where Knightscope, I have a whole video talking about this if you want to go take a look at it, where Knightscope can basically send them send them an order or a form or whatever you want to call it to say, hey, buy some of our stock. And then they will purchase some stock from Knightscope. And they have this set up as an arrangement. You can look through all the details. And that is it. And so I have a prior video about this. It probably was a couple days after April 4th, where you can go and take a look. I suppose I could probably take a look for myself and show you these videos if you want to take a look at it. And I probably should hop off after that, but I will find these. How do I go? Your channel, is this it? Sorry, I always go to the creator thing. I don't know if I want to do that. So let me, so if I go here, the videos here would be Knightscope. Here's the one about the arrangement with B. Riley from 2 months ago. Knightscope $100 million equity facility. So there you go. And the other one, Dimension Funding. That one was back here. So Knightscope's cash flow improvements via Dimension Funding. If you want to go take a look at that. So that hopefully those two videos are my best answers to your question. Try to explain what they had. So Jay says, thanks, Jay. Thanks for hopping on. Glad to see you. And Walkaza says, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dustin, and congrats, your subs are growing. Thank you. Thank you for hopping on and tuning in. And I'm going to go now. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it, and have a good one.